Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right in today because we've got a seriously paradigm-shifting look at workplace leadership to unpack. We're diving deep into the core concepts from a phenomenal book called The Emotionally Intelligent Manager. Now, if you're the kind of person who loves clear, structured frameworks to level up how you work and lead, well, you're exactly where you need to be. We're about to completely flip the script on what it actually means to make smart, rational decisions at work. So, let's get into it.
I am willing to bet that almost every single one of us has heard some version of this at work. Hey, let's look at things rationally, or we need to leave emotions out of this, right? We've basically been conditioned to believe that true professionalism means checking our feelings at the office door. We tend to treat emotions like they're just these chaotic, irrational impulses that only get in the way of our brilliant, logical minds. But what if that conventional wisdom is completely backward?
And that brings us to the foundation of today's explainer, The Emotionally Intelligent Manager by David R. Caruso and Peter Salovey. The absolute game-changing premise these authors present is that suppressing your emotions is actually a terrible management strategy. In fact, they make the case that trying to lead without emotion isn't just hard, it is literally biologically impossible. To be a truly effective manager, you absolutely have to integrate your logic with your feelings, the whole shebang.
So here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the emotion myth at work, move into emotions as essential data, outline the 4 key emotional skills, put them into practice using the emotional blueprint, and finally, look at becoming an effective leader.
All right, part 1, the emotion myth at work.
You know, we often fall into this weird false dichotomy in the workplace. On one hand, you have Manager A. This is your classic rule of reason boss, who constantly keeps emotions at arm's length, totally isolating them from the actual work. And then, on the flip side, you've got Manager B, the rule of emotion boss, who is super tuned into their feelings and lets them dictate their entire day. We kind of trick ourselves into thinking we have to choose, right? Like, am I the cold, calculating robot or the overly sensitive manager? But the authors point out that this is a total trap. If you're exclusively Manager A, you're actively ignoring vital information, and if you're only Manager B, you're letting feelings hijack your logic. We absolutely need a new way to look at this.
Which leads us to part 2, emotions as essential data. It turns out neuroscience completely shatters that old emotion myth. Modern research, especially the incredible work by neuroscientists like Antonio Damasio, proves that rational thinking literally cannot happen without emotion. Think about that for a second. When the emotion centers of the human brain get damaged, patients don't suddenly turn into these ultra-logical, hyper-efficient decision-making machines. No, they actually become incapable of making good decisions at all. Your emotions aren't some useless evolutionary leftover like an appendix. They are literally the foundation of your intelligence. So the crucial takeaway that you really need to internalize here is this: emotions are data. Full stop. They aren't just random, chaotic noise bouncing around in your head. They are hard, measurable signals about what's happening in our world. They motivate us, they direct our focus, and they actively guide how we solve problems. Seriously, just like a complex financial spreadsheet or a deep dive market analysis, your emotions, and by the way, the emotions of your team, are a set of critical data points. And any educated manager really needs to learn how to read and use them.
Let's look at how this actually plays out in practice. Notice how specific emotions map perfectly to highly adaptive behaviors. I mean, millions of years of evolution hardwired these into us to keep us alive, and they are just as relevant in the boardroom today as they were back then. Take fear. It isn't just a weakness, it's data. It's telling you, hey, act right now to avoid missing that deadline, or don't make that bad investment. Anger? That's data telling you to fight against an unfair policy or fix a broken process. Sadness is a signal to pull the team together and ask for support. And joy? That signals success and screams, let's reproduce whatever we just did. Even the quote-unquote negative emotions have incredible, totally logical value when you know how to read the data.
Moving on to part 3, the 4 key emotional skills.
The authors developed a really structured 4-step framework to help us actually process all this emotional data. Step 1 is to identify emotions, basically accurately reading what you and the people around you are feeling. Step 2 is to use emotions, which means intentionally letting those feelings influence your thinking. Step 3 is to understand emotions, figuring out the why behind them and predicting what might happen next. And finally, step 4 is to manage emotions, where you stay open to the data and integrate it into your actions. You can really think of this entire framework as your brand new operating system for decision-making.
I want to look a bit closer at Step 2, using emotions, because this is fascinating. Different moods fundamentally alter our cognitive processing. Positive moods literally expand our thinking.
They're exactly what you want for brainstorming, generating fresh ideas, and seeing big-picture possibilities. But check out negative moods. A slightly negative or serious mood actually focuses our attention on the fine details. It enhances deductive reasoning and makes us ridiculously good at spotting errors. You would never, ever want to brainstorm a wild new marketing vision while your team is in a grumpy negative mood. But if you need to proofread a $1 million budget proposal, actually, a slightly anxious negative mood is exactly what you want. An emotionally intelligent manager knows how to match the mood to the task.
All right, part 4, using the emotional blueprint. Imagine you're leading a super important product development meeting. You're just trying to get consensus so everyone can move forward, right? Then, out of nowhere, the marketing VP requests some late, last-minute changes to the product specs. Now, you've had these kinds of requests before, and rationally, logically speaking, they seem pretty minor. You're just about to say, yeah, sure, no problem, and jump to the next agenda item. But as you pause, you feel this vague, hard-to-describe uneasiness settling over the room. In the old logic-only paradigm, you just ignore that feeling and push forward. But let's see what happens when we use our new emotional toolkit instead.
Let's put that 4-step blueprint into action. Step 1, identify. You pause and really look at your team. You notice these subtle signs of caution on the faces of your senior developers, and you recognize a creeping feeling of discomfort in your own gut. Step 2, use. Instead of just brushing it off, you let that feeling of worry actually focus your attention. Like we just talked about, this negative feeling sharpens your focus on potential problems. Step 3, understand. You start asking a few pointed questions and quickly trace the cause of the unease. You suddenly realize that while the VP's changes look totally minor on the surface, they're actually going to break the underlying software architecture. Step 4, manage. You stay open to this really uncomfortable data. Now, it would be so much easier in the short term to just say yes and please the VP, but you manage the situation by taking this new data back to them, explaining why the change just isn't feasible, and boom, you just saved the company from a disastrous launch. You navigated the conflict successfully by using emotions as your guide.
And that brings us to our final section, part 5, becoming an effective leader.
The beauty of this emotional blueprint is how directly it connects to your core leadership functions. People call this the soft stuff, but getting it right is actually the hardest, most essential work you're ever going to do. Building truly effective teams requires you to identify subtle shifts in group morale and manage emotional contagion. You know, how moods spread like wildfire from person to person. Planning and deciding, that isn't just about crunching numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about having the emotional capacity to stay open to really uncomfortable facts without getting immediately defensive. In communicating a vision, you can't just hand out a dry corporate memo. You have to genuinely generate and project shared positive emotions if you want to inspire actual, boots-on-the-ground buy-in from your organization.
Consider this incredible insight from the brilliant emotion theorist Sylvan Tompkins. He said, "Out of the marriage of reason with affect, there issues clarity with passion. Reason without affect would be impotent. Affect without reason would be blind." I mean, that perfectly summarizes everything we've talked about in today's explainer. We aren't throwing away logic here. Not at all. We are marrying it to the rich, complex, evolutionary data system of our emotions. Because having one without the other, that just leaves you half blind as a leader.
So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Think about the very next meeting you have on your calendar. Are you going to continue trying to leave your emotions at the door, forcing a fake smile, and completely ignoring the most vital data in the room? Or are you going to start identifying, using, understanding, and managing those emotions as your most powerful management tool? The truly emotionally intelligent manager knows that it's the combination of heart and mind that unlocks real success. Thank you so much for hanging out and exploring this fascinating framework with me today. I really hope you take these tools and start building your own emotional blueprint right away. See you next time.